really thought there was this world where we're going to have this assistant who knows everything about me, who's almost like a digital clone of me. Work hard on things that don't seem quite possible but should be, and take a swing at something big. Just go and like roll our sleeves up and work together. Are we building a thing that's going to get work done for us when humans aren't sitting at their screen looking at a website, and that's also going to self-heal over time? And that's really the space that we want to be. Let me go and see if I can figure out what's going wrong for you tonight, so you don't have to wake up. Maybe let me go and be that DevOps engineer for you. What might change if humans aren't the main customers of Datadog tomorrow?
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Chief AI Officer. Really excited today to bring you Diamond Bishop, who is the Director of Engineering at Datadog. Diamond, thanks so much for chatting with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We should have almost done this in person, given that you're so close in New York, but it's always easier during the day to do it like this. Before we get into a bunch of topics related to Datadog, some of the AI moonshots you're working on, how you think about AI and engineering more generally, can you give our listeners just a bit of context on your background and Datadog?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've been in AI or machine learning, as we would probably have been more likely to call it, for about 15 plus years now. Big AI or machine learning fan. I kind of started in it because I really liked AI in games. Like most programmers you meet, I feel like we're like, hey, I saw a game and I want to like make a game, and that was what I really want to do. For me, it was like I saw the kind of AI side of games, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. I'd love to do this in the real world too. So I went to grad school for it, left with a master's, and really spent the next 15 years or so making AI friends in some sense or another. I worked on the early days of Cortana for Microsoft, Alexa for Amazon, worked on PyTorch for Facebook, ran a small AI DevOps startup for a little while. That was then brought into Datadog, and that's why I'm here now. And at Datadog, I run a variety of different AI groups that really thinks about how do we apply a lot of the recent advances and things that are coming to the problems that our customers in DevOps have.
That's great. Are there any specific games or experiences with AI in games that really come to mind when you think about what inspired that interest?
The very earliest, honestly, was chess engines. So I was in like ninth grade or so and working on a programming class, and I had this great teacher who was a former entrepreneur who was like, hey, just go and build a cool product. Like, go and build something interesting. At the time, we were writing in Pascal, somewhat ages me as well. And he was like, build something cool. And I was like, well, I really like playing chess on my computer all the time. I want to go figure out, I think I'd be better at it if I go and figure out how to make a chess engine. Turns out it was a very painful process. It took a very long time to figure out how all these things work. I don't think I got any better at chess. I probably got worse because I didn't play very much for a long time while I was just sitting there working on this thing. But it was a ton of fun.
Yeah, I've heard several people on this show actually reference, there are those pivotal moments like AlphaGo and Deep Blue, like those moments as being moments that kindled like a lot of interest for them in the potential of what AI can do. But more generally, I think you're right. The gaming space is a huge entryway into this space more generally. And along that journey, was there a specific project or a kind of like moment that really changed how you think about what AI could potentially do beyond gaming?
For sure. For a little while, I was working at Microsoft and thinking about what does it mean for us to put speech and natural language processing almost everywhere across all of our surfaces. We started with this idea of Cortana, Cortana, who was a character from Halo, and thinking about it for the Windows Phone, which, again, no one uses a Windows Phone anymore. Those are long dead. But it was a really cool project to think about what does it mean to run this thing that needs to go on a small device. But then, of course, Microsoft has a Surface everywhere. We were looking at Xbox. We were looking at Windows. We were looking at a variety of other products that we might build ourselves and thinking, into the future, what does it mean for someone to have an AI assistant who's always there, who maybe even moves between devices, who thinks about what you're doing? And that's really what started me thinking down the line of, I think this is pretty doable. It was 2012, so I think I was wrong at the time, but we're much closer to it now. But I really thought there was this world where we're going to have this assistant who knows everything about me, who's almost like a digital clone of me, who's kind of following along all the different surfaces that are out there. So I was very excited to work on that, and then basically do the same thing working on Alexa for a few years when that was getting off the ground. That was locally nearby. We're right across the pond. Microsoft and Amazon sit right near each other, and ended up trading a lot of people back and forth for these projects. But it was, again, kind of showing the potential. I don't think either of them went where we wanted them to go, where they are in everyone's. Briefly, Alexa was in everyone's home, but not anymore. But I think things like ChatGPT now are in everyone's pocket, and other assistants are going to be doing the same thing in the future.
Yeah, it's an interesting moment where the technology is starting to catch up with the vision of those initial projects, right? Where I think there's still a lot of struggles with how you deal with so much context, and like who's going to end up owning all of that context, and whether that's the device maker like Apple or whether it's kind of the LLM. It's going to always have to be some type of both, but it's a very interesting time to be building in this space for sure. At Datadog, you are, director of engineering. You're also kind of involved in, I guess, a project called AI Skunk Works, or like, tell me a little bit about that, because I love the name. I saw it on your LinkedIn profile, and I would love to know why that name. I think it says a lot about how you're maybe thinking about it.
Yeah, so I worked for Lockheed for a few years, and one of the reasons I worked for Lockheed was because of what Skunk Works was for engineers back in the day. It was this place where a bunch of interdisciplinary people would get together and work on new ideas and work hard on things that don't seem quite possible but should be, and take a swing at something big, and really not work in silos, not work in like a large company way where it's like, hey, there's the PMs over here, there's engineers here, there's scientists here, we have this roadmap, this process. No, you take a really big bet and you all think about it and you work on it hard every single day. It's a little startup-ish, it's a little like, just go and like roll our sleeves up and work together. And that's how I wanted my team here to work. And that's what we're doing. We have like a small interdisciplinary group that I'm purposely not growing big, just like Skunk Works purposely did not get too big, so that we can sit there and just try out new things and really push the boundaries on what's possible for using the kind of new AI stuff that's coming out.
And as you push those boundaries, what are the things that are exciting to you? Like, where are those boundaries, I guess, to start, and then where do you want to push through?
Yeah, there's a variety of things. So when I first came here, I started by working on our assistant, which is called Bits AI. And Bits AI is really meant to be the AI assistant or agent that can do SRE work for you. So they might look and see, you got some logs, some metrics, some traces, an alert goes off. Let me go and see if I can figure out what's going wrong for you tonight, so you don't have to wake up. Maybe let me go and be that DevOps engineer for you. And that product's really going actually quite well. We have a variety of kind of tasks and hats that Bits AI can put on now. We can do security and analysts. We can do SRE work. We can do code generation. Those are all great, and that launched this year. But then we were thinking, what's next? If we look a year out, if we look 2 years out, if we look 5 years out, we can't predict that, but we can know that things are changing so fast in the AI field right now that you don't want to just be locked to a product roadmap. And we think there's still a lot to do in the bit space, so we're just moving forward with that, given customer feedback and iterating on that. But we also want to spin up this new effort that was, what might change if humans aren't the main customers of Datadog tomorrow? Or what might change if people don't need to go and look at a UI? Or what might change if most of your coworkers aren't humans who are sitting there with you every single day? And that's really when we start to think about what's the boundary, it's the kind of thing people are talking about this year, where agents are kind of taking on some tasks, but not all of them. Everyone wants this like world where they're kind of directing a bunch of agents or a bunch of autonomous systems. And we want to try to live in that world and build like that world is true, and see what breaks and see what works well, see what doesn't, and see if we can, see what products come out of that, but also just what can we do that would help our customers live in the future sooner than if we just keep iterating the way we are.
I love that. I want to get into that a little more. So in that world, I don't know how much you can talk about what you're actually exploring, but is it figuring out, obviously you sit on top of all this data, you're like an observability monitoring platform, you have some of those agentic things like Bits AI already built in, but is it thinking about like, are you different data schemas that you might use so that agents can interact with it more easily? Is it like you nodded to orchestration, like what are some of the big bets within that paradigm that you're thinking about?
Yeah, so there's a couple. One I would start with, and the one we have started with, is if you've read Dwarkesh's blog post where he says continual learning is kind of the deal breaker for AGI, let's say right now, or AI being useful. I mostly agree, but I disagree that we don't know how to do this. I think that there's a bunch of tools at our disposal that we need to work out. So number one is just how do we learn from people? A lot of the agents that exist today do some learning, but very little. And a lot of times we're trying to build this agent that would work well for everyone. The reality is you want something just like a coworker who kind of gets on board to how you do things, that can learn from you, that you can customize a little bit just by talking to them, by giving them feedback, by interacting with them. And there's been some products in the space that start to look into this. This is like Mira's startup is doing a lot of reinforcement learning. Unclear still how much. They're pretty secretive, but like that's what they're thinking about is like what do you do if you're trying to be OpenAI but very custom in reinforcement learning for each company. Products like Devin, the coding agent, had some idea of like you pointing at something and being like, oh, that was wrong. Let me give you some feedback there. And I think they're all looking at similar problems, but no one's really figured out exactly how to solve that yet. So that's one big piece, is this learning pillar. How do we customize and personalize SRE agents, DevOps agents, software agents, like all these things that help you operate your system, not just write code, but help you operate your system in a way that your system can kind of be fully running in the background with a team of these little agents. Yeah, I'll stop there before I jump to the next one. Any questions about that one?
No, I mean, I think that's a very interesting thing to focus in on, right? Because there's this, obviously the foundation model layer is trying to build very general solutions. There's tons of hype in the space around vertical AI agents and the value of narrowing in on domains because of how much more reliable they can be, or maybe because that reinforcement cycle is so much tighter and so much more limited that you can get to a lot of value very quickly. Yeah, I guess on that range, like as you think about building out these various agents within the domain that Datadog lives in, how much of it is generalizable across agents, and how much are you thinking about this in terms of like, hey, we need to build like point agents and then like learning mechanisms for each of those areas? Or is it more like we should design like a more generalizable learning architecture that is then having these different domain specific agents running on top of it?
We expect what it'll probably look like is that you'll have a set of general agents that are maybe task-specific agents, like we started to have already today, the first-party agents, let's call them. But then you as a customer or a dev or an SRE who's using these will spin up and maybe create your own custom agents that mimic what you do as well. And they can work hand in hand and learn, but still work together with a generalized one. It's kind of like people, train like LoRa's, like adapters that sit on top of a generalized agent. I expect that we'll have something somewhat similar, or a generalized model, where you'll have this generalized, or you'll have this first-party agent, and then you'll also have a couple, maybe many, special custom agents that you built just for yourself, that just learns from you, that maybe can go off and talk to that other one. Our Bits AI agent is just really good at doing SRE deep dives, but doesn't know that much about how you guys work every single day, and it's learning. But then you go and create a quick custom one that's like, oh, this is exactly like what I do in the morning, or exactly how I debug a problem. You write your prompt. You maybe even have a model that sits there and watches you for a few days and learns from you. And then that one can interact with the SRE agent, with the security agent, with a variety of other ones out there, but be your more kind of personalized mirror. So for us, a big part of it is this learning. And then the second pillar is really just making it easy for you to create these. Like honestly, within enterprises, the number of companies that you talk to that they really want to build a quick little agent that will just get triggered by PRs and go and review it in the way that you review your PR, following your guidelines, everything like that. It's harder to do than you'd expect because enterprises have a lot of limitations on security, on like what MCP servers they might want to give access to, on like, hey, I just want to write a few lines of Python. I don't want to have to manage an entire like operational service that is running this agent every single day on every PR. So the second part for us is just building that infrastructure layer. But just like OpenAI has their agent builder that's kind of no-code-ish, we think of it more as building the building blocks so that someone who is code first can develop their own customized agents to run along with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's so many, to your point, a lot of things that make that challenging, right? From just figuring out the kind of access protocols, like inheriting the access that that person might have, or like, and then what can they pass off to other agents within that framework. But if it's people teaching these agents, providing like that tight learning and feedback loop, what do you think the appetite is there? Are you seeing like incredibly strong appetite? Are you seeing any reluctance from, I guess, more senior or more hardcore like coders that feel like agents just aren't there yet, and like, why waste my time teaching this agent? Like, I could just build stuff myself. I guess, like, what are you seeing in market in terms of the reception to some of these ideas, or is that irrelevant because you're thinking a few years out?
I think it's very relevant because you still, even when you're thinking about a big vision, you want to have a way to get there with customers giving you feedback, with users giving you feedback, right? So we definitely see an appetite for that already. There are certainly some skeptics of capability long term, of like how much can it do, but that's also part of why I think customization is very important. People, especially devs, who already know parts of how these things work, are very willing to impose their own knowledge on the system if they can. Especially if you can tell them, hey, go and write a little bit of Python and you can kind of customize it to your liking a little bit. You don't even just have to give it some data and hope for the best. You can add some boundaries, add some code-driven workflow aspects to it, make it your own. So I think that part is a clear part of if you think of it as like crawl, walk, run of like, I want to build an agent that can just learn from me as that run in the future. The crawl might be, I can go and write a even LangGraph based Python agent that runs on our infrastructure, emits data that we can then learn from to improve a little bit on the walk, and then eventually get to that point where we're always improving. So we certainly see strong demand for this kind of thing.
And a lot of people I speak to that are building these systems have started talking more and more about, I mean, there was like RAG, then there was graph RAG. I feel like knowledge graphs have become part of this conversation more and more as they're trying to figure out how to make systems more reliable, how to provide kind of structured understanding of the domain versus just like a bunch of context dumping all of the time. Are those ideas that you're playing around with?
Somewhat. I think we're still early to be able to know how much we would need to lean into one of those directions or another. Which kind of comes back to the like last pillar, I guess, that I think a lot about, which is eval. But that's not new. I think everyone's talking about eval today because you don't really know if you don't have good eval or like an appropriate way to measure success. You don't know if the graph RAG does a little better than the RAG. You don't know if adding some more structure, going back to the old days of like semantic web, using like tuples and like facts. Like we don't know if that's useful yet until we know how to measure success. I do think that doing more than just straight up RAG and grabbing as much context as possible is needed. If you kind of introspect with how a dev on your team might work, even a junior dev who's trying to debug a system, they want to go and look up how is this system connected to another system that's going wrong. What does it do? What's the structure of the system? What are the entities that are in the system? How's the system built? And that's all more than just grabbing some docs and querying for something that kind of sounds like something else semantically. So there is some structure needed, especially in the DevOps space. And we have started to test out things like, are the service graphs useful? Is it useful for me to tell you how these services are all connected to each other? Is it useful for me to tell you a little bit about what this team does? Is it useful for me to tell you a little bit about what this person's done recently and go and grab, the one or two hops away from them for the steps they took recently, the things they've debugged recently? And we are seeing that some of that is useful, but it's not clear yet where we're going to go there.
Okay. And are there any, so you mentioned the three pillars. Last one was eval. Are there any other ones, or are those the core three?
Those are the main ones right now. It's this, and I think like what kind of cuts across all of them is this UX aspect of we have a lot to experiment with on what is the appropriate human AI or human assistant or agent collaboration space. It's probably not just chat in the future, but it's probably also not just like speech like Alexa thought it was. It's probably something that's more like how do we interact together on a shared screen? If I'm trying to work with you through a problem, I might look over at your screen, you might point to something. There's all this stuff that goes on in our back and forth that we're missing with how you work with an AI system. There's a lot to explore there. I'm not sure what that is yet, but that's kind of cuts across all these. There's a new UX paradigm that we're still searching for.
Yeah, whoever figures that out, I think will do very, very well for themselves. But it is an interesting problem space to explore. I want to come back a little bit to your Skunk Works approach and the team that you're building at Datadog. Talk to me a little bit more. You mentioned it's interdisciplinary. How do you think about like what types of people you bring into a team like that? Like what makes a great person in the modern AI engineering Skunk Works type format?
A lot of it is also what I recommend to people when hiring new engineers who want to take advantage of this kind of tech. First is you want someone who's very curious. You want people who are always trying new things. They're not kind of set in their ways. So this is a little bit back to the question you asked earlier of do we see maybe very senior folks kind of being skeptical or not wanting to use any of these tools? I think that the right people for projects like this are people who don't believe that they know the right way to do anything always, and that they think they can keep getting better.
Hmm.
And that's easy to suss out in discussions and interviews when you're talking to people because you can ask them, tell me what you're working on today. Like, what are you using to augment yourself? What are the tools you've tried recently? And if they aren't trying new stuff, they're not really being curious. In Amazon, we had this leadership principle that was learn and be curious. I think that's incredibly important for these kind of folks. The other is it is very helpful if someone has some AI background, even if it's like a small amount of applied AI, because then it's not just a magic thing. It's like, oh no, I already think stochastically. I already think like these things are not always going to be perfect. There's always different problems that come up. I know a little bit of how the system works enough that I don't feel like it's just a black box. That's very useful too.
Yeah, the curiosity piece is one that, again, people on this show have talked about a lot. And that's not just for AI teams. It's for kind of most roles right now. If you want to hire the person that's going to be the most willing or the most transformative in their use of AI, it's going to be the person that's probably the most curious and that has more of a building, tinkering mentality. I know that's true in my own work too, where it's always okay, I could do this the way I've done it for the last 15 years, or I could think about what this looks like if I kind of go AI first or like build a workflow for this. And it might take me 10 hours this one time and not, it might get like 90% of the way there, but that's like a huge win when I extrapolate that for how many times I have to do this task. So it's a very interesting time to think about how hiring changes a lot in that. The other thing you mentioned like earlier on is, you're on a you're exploring these big vision ideas. How do you decide what to prioritize? Like, you obviously can't just focus on short-term ROI for any of these types of things. Like, what is that discussion like within the team or like outside of the team with other leaders within Datadog?
Yeah, there's certainly, I don't know if we've solved this yet, but the way I try to think about it and the way our executives that we kind of run this by every so often try to think about it is we're trying to treat it as much like you're just trying to take some bets in a startup-ish feel. You have some vision for where you want to go. You have some clear pain points and things that people are facing today that you can start to help them with along that vision. And then you'll see kind of where you land and you'll iterate fast. And that's where like the iteration is the most important part. But in the very beginning, we had a few different project ideas that we came to the founders of our company with. This is also the nice thing is that our CEO and CTO were the founders of Datadog and are still running the company. So they have an appetite for this. They've done this themselves when they were starting the company. They are also very involved in the startup community. So they think a lot about what does it mean to bring new things to market all the time. Um, and we wanted to strike a balance somewhere between it's not an obvious thing that's going to make us a bunch of money today, but it's something that is also not just pie in the sky, blue sky, like just go off and do a project. It needs to be something that people are willing to use tomorrow.
Hmm.
So we really tried to find things that were a little bit just outside of what we do today, but also could have a big vision if we go further, and that we went and vetted them with customers, right? Like I've spoke to me and my the PM on my team who I partner with us on. Went and spoke to like 50 plus different companies, people who do use Datadog, people who don't use Datadog, and really just felt out what were the problems they're facing in the current era, and where do they think that they're starting to have more pain points, what are they trying to use to solve them in this like agent-based space. And that's a lot of what also helped us hone in on what is a current pain point, but also an interesting long-term problem.
And in that, figuring that out, do you find that there are projects that fall in the like, okay, this is a huge productivity gain and would be a massive win for us, and then there are some that are fundamentally transforming how that work gets done and like completely changes how a customer behaves?
Yeah, and I think this is back to what I was saying about thinking about AI agents or automated AI systems doing more work than humans. That was kind of the thing that we had as our like, this is where I think things are going, and no customer is necessarily telling me this. This is just the bet that I'm willing to make.
Hmm.
Because if you ignore that bet, you certainly have a bunch of projects that just fall into this is a pain point I have today, and we could probably make money on it. An example of this is like Eval. Back to this thing where everyone's frustrated with Eval. No one has a good solution with Eval necessarily. There's a bunch of companies being spun up in the space. I almost initially just wanted to spend all the time on like, let's just build a really, really good eval product. Like build a product that helps people understand how what problems they're running into, does data analysis, and lets you improve. And we have some steps to that product already within Datadog, as you'd expect, because we have a lot of analytics, we have a lot of observability data. So it's an area that I think we could do really well in, and we are still spending some time on, but not my team. But the reason we kind of stayed away from just spending our time on that was that I don't think that's enough. That's not enough of a like big swing. It's a thing that we're going to solve over time, no matter what. But it doesn't necessarily change the way people build products tomorrow or build their infrastructure or their services tomorrow. So I really want to find an area that would let us change and kind of go along with what I would think of as this shift from kind of building cloud services to building AI-powered services.
Okay. Talk to me a little bit more about like that distinction in your mind, because that's a good, I like the comparison of those two things.
Yeah, the distinction is very much are we building services that humans are going to operate and do all the DevOps work for, the security work for, everything like that every day, and then have humans interacting with them as well every single day? Or are we building the thing that I think Harrison Chase was calling these like autonomous agents, or like I'm forgetting the exact phrase that he used, but it's these agents that run in the background. Ambient agents is what he was saying. Are we building a thing that's going to get work done for us when humans aren't sitting at their screen, looking at a website, looking at an application, and that's also going to self-heal over time? And that's really the space that we want to be. It's like we want to be helping people build AI native services that are really made not necessarily to run with humans, but instead to run with fewer and fewer humans over time.
Yeah, that's probably the most interesting space to play in. I think that will be where this ends up. There's a lot of work to get there on the part of not just your team, but obviously all of the enterprises and companies that are using this stuff. How far along on the adoption curve do you think we are? Like how, just thinking about how many POCs fail, like how hard it is to get relatively simple domain specific agents into production at large companies. Like how many years out is something like that to you?
I think we're still only a handful of years out, even though it feels like we're far away from it right now. And the reason I say that is I think it's like exponential growth yearly. So we're at this beginning of the J curve. and that always feels like it's not moving a lot and that it's linear. But if you look back 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months to what was possible, it's changing so fast. And part of that is the models keep getting better. Part of that is there's more scaffolding being built around it. And part of it is that companies like ours and others are sitting there trying to figure out what's the right way to use these very powerful models to be able to learn from people within enterprises and to be able to ship and build products that are useful. A lot of the failures that were publicized in the recent papers and discussed recently are not because they're not possible. I think that they didn't necessarily have the right scaffolding. They didn't have the right learning processes, and there's just a lot to learn. And we're still so early right now, but things are moving fast.
I agree. It's interesting to watch that even right now, the current capabilities, you could totally transform the way that most work gets done within companies if it were fully implemented, and not to mention what those capabilities might look like in a year. So, and the best companies are the ones that are building not just on the edge of that, I think far past the edge, where the model capabilities are currently always letting them down. But then when something improves, they're like, oh, okay, we tabled this project a while back. Like, let's throw this new model at it and see if it works. I feel like those are the ones that are going to be changing the most about like how we do work, across any industry. I want to shift a little bit away from more kind of the technical side, maybe just more towards your experience. For those listening on the show, you've worked at both sides. I mean, how big was Datadog when you joined? Out of
I think
curiosity.
we're around like 5,000
Okay, so
folks.
that was already pretty big. But you've
Yeah.
you've done the startup thing. You founded your own company. You've built small AI teams within larger companies as well. What's what are some of the pros and cons of doing that within a large company context versus like a smaller team versus your own startup?
Yeah, I mean, I know Datadog is a public company that has like 7, 8,000 people, but it still feels small to me in some sense because I also worked at Microsoft and Facebook and
Right.
Amazon, which were huge. So I think of them as like three different types of really companies to build AI products. The largest companies have this natural reach, which is very nice for shipping new products and for getting a lot of data. As a startup, the hardest thing really tends to be this data problem. Like this is the thing we struggled with the most. I, one of the reasons we joined Datadog and decided it was the right move to be acquired at the time was that we were struggling to get data within companies to build S3 agents and DevOps assistants that could work really well. And Datadog had that already, right? It's like they're naturally there already. They get all this data. It's why when I look at a lot of the SRE agent companies that are being spun up by themselves and they don't have an observability product already, they don't have a bunch of other ways to gather that data, that's going to be their biggest risk. The plus side is always as a small team, as a small company, you can move faster with fewer people to interact with fewer customers to piss off if you do something bad. Like as much as we can move fast as a small team within Datadog, we still have to be safe with customer data. We're still like, we want to be. We still have a lot of customers that rely on us in a variety of ways. That means that you can't just kind of be a cowboy. And as a startup, you can always do that. You can just be like, hey, we got 10 customers, we got 50 customers, we got 5,000 customers. Like, let's just go try something. Let's just see what happens, right? And we have to be a little careful about that. But on the flip side, again, we have all this data that makes it a lot easier to see where things are going, to build models that can be customized, to build these kind of personalized systems. And that's, in this era, becoming more and more valuable because everyone can go and pick up a foundation model and build a quick little like prototype. But the hard part is not shipping a prototype or a demo. The hard part is getting a valuable task that is done well in production, and that only comes with knowing with a lot of data, being able to do eval appropriately, and being able to improve that system, which is the one thing big companies are very good at there.
Yeah, that is the hard, as you said, right? The demo is easy. The ability for that agent to perform across all of the edge cases and at the scale of a larger company is much, much harder to pull off.
Yep.
And to your point around like the scaffolding and, some of the more recent high profile research around the number of pilots that fail, like there is an element of that, right? Like they just weren't really set up to succeed in some of the ways. And like even just yeah, the context in which that happens was suboptimal. There's a lot of AI agents in marketing, right? I think every like established company is trying to rebrand themselves as agentic. All of the startups are like leaning into this very, very hard. There's less of them out in the wild in terms of transforming. I mean, you mentioned that adoption is kind of growing quickly and almost inevitable, but like, do you think that there's anything that actually needs to change fundamentally for a much more widespread adoption, or is it just a matter of time?
So I think there's a lot that can be done with the current models and the current work that's out there, even if nothing else improved. You can build a ton of agents that can do a lot of low-hanging fruit tasks. They require a little bit of unhobbling, as I think Leopold would have said, but they're not a lot of like, there's no science work to get these things done. And an example of this is in our DevOps space for sure. Our SRE agent, even if you change no models tomorrow, can just keep getting better and can do a really good job, I think, of the things that your junior engineer, your junior SRE would handle. Will it get to the expert level without more improvements to models and techniques? Absolutely not. But it can do enough that you're like, oh, great, you're saving me time every day. I'm willing to pay for that. Everyone will use it. It's kind of like sitting there augmenting your existing people, but not necessarily replacing them, just making them more productive. But I do think there's a lot of work to be done still in the personalization space, in the learning space, and in this memory-ish space to get us to systems that can be at the level of humans. And I think we all know in the community, at least, that that might not happen with the current model architectures. There might be a few more things that need to change to get even better there. But I think there's still a ton of potential to take advantage of without any of that even improving yet.
Yeah, I think that gets to the heart of this, whether transformer architectures and just scaling will enable models to really truly reason and kind of learn and adapt in situations. Many people's definition of intelligence very vaguely. Do you have any thoughts on that? Like, do you think this architecture, are there any other types of architectures that you find interesting that you would want to explore or that you would want to see more money being invested in?
I don't have a specific one. I would say that I just think we should be trying more things out. I don't think all of our brightest minds should just be working on the next biggest transformer model. I think that we should be distributing out. And that is one of the risks right now, is that it's hard for academia to try new things out in the current era because of how much money it takes to really build these really large models. And maybe that'll be okay. They'll push them to think about some other techniques that could improve. And it's also a little bit hard. I think I do worry a little bit sometimes about the big labs, not being outside of a big lab, so no inside information or anything like that. I worry a little bit about the big labs are kind of fighting over just building the next biggest model because it's the easiest way to keep moving those metrics up. And maybe that's okay because the bitter lesson has been true for a while. Like the bigger clusters, the bigger models, they just keep producing. So yeah, let's keep trying it. And there are some new techniques being tried for sure inside these labs. But I would like to see more ideas tried out. That's why I like to see people like John Carmack with his little lab just trying out. He's purposely staying away from current architectures and trying other things out. I think we need more people like that.
Yeah, I know of a few in the space too, like some that are more of the kind of like neuro-symbolic AI bent, focus very hard on things like that. It's difficult in this current climate to raise any money for anything outside of the transformer architecture, to your point.
Yep.
But yeah, it's never great, I think, for innovation when everything is happening in one space, even if it provides some it's providing some benefits, but it's also like at what level of efficiency I think is debatable. Um, I could go on for a long time, Diamond, but I want to get to our lightning round just with an eye towards time. Are there any models or platforms that you're most excited about right now?
I just like any open source models. I'm happy to see more and more of them coming out. I'm glad OpenAI put one out, even if it wasn't the best model that they could have put out. It's still nice to have things to play with. Platform wise, or like tool wise, let's say, I'm excited to seeing people build apps or services that are kind of made for agents or AI systems to use them instead of humans. Vibe Kanban, Agent Mail, a few other products like that are coming out. That is, to me, like the office suite for AI systems or assistants. Like, I think we need more of that. We shouldn't assume they're just going to use human ones. But yeah, that kind of stuff.
I love that. I haven't actually thought about that much. I've been deep in, MCP and like connecting models to existing systems, but taking that a step further and figuring out is there a better way that this work could even be done is a great place to explore. Do you see what's maybe one of the things that you wish people would stop spending so much money in AI on? That's maybe not transformer architectures, but where do you see the most waste, in your opinion?
That's a good question. Probably, I'd say in this kind of rebuilding the next. I don't need more marketing agents. I don't need more recruiting agents. The number of startups that I see spinning up in that space is like, I get it. There's probably money to be made there. But try something else out. Like, I would love to see more startups kind of tackling other work tasks that are not just the big five that are out there, because they're easy to automate.
Yeah, I think that's the key. They're easy to automate and they're close to revenue, so that people's
Yeah.
eyes light up when they see the opportunities there, even if it's a very crowded market. Diamond, that was really, really enjoyable conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time. If people want to learn more about you and follow your work and Datadog, where should they go?
Yeah, two spaces. I'm on Twitter at Diamond Bishop. I promise there are not a lot of people with my name. You should be able to find me quickly. And then I am also on YouTube at Unhobbling AI. We do a weekly series where we just share us using a product that's out there or a tool. It's kind of a forcing function for me to just go and use something new this week, and share it with the world too. But it was really great talking to you as well. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Well, good to see that you're also living by the practice of staying curious with Unhobbling AI. So I encourage everyone listening right now listening and watching to go check out Unhobbling AI or Diamond Bishop on Twitter. Diamond, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. Have a good one.